yeah, when Jeremy was putting together the schedule for this conference, he sent me an email to ask if I would be comfortable with the high pressure slot of going last. And I was like, well, it wasn't a high pressure slot until you said that. I didn't know that there was pressure for various slots in a conference, but here we are. So yeah, as we round out the conference, I want to echo what some others have said and just give a really big thanks to sponsors, organizers, Jeremy, Mark, all the volunteers that have helped out with all of this, all of the other speakers, and all of you, because you showed up and you made Blue Ridge Ruby really, really great. And these have been a fantastic 2 days. And hopefully, if we haven't ruined everything for Jeremy and his family, then maybe we'll do this again sometime. So, round of applause, please. So, thank you. So yeah, how can I move forward when I don't know where I want to go? I want to start by doing a couple prompts, some audience participation. So if you feel comfortable participating, I would love it if you would raise your hand if any of these apply to you, either now or in the past. Show of hands if you know exactly where you want to go in your career. I see no hands. I see one hand. Okay. Wow. Because you're almost done. That's fair. That's fair. Show of hands if this feels applicable to you. You have a skill that has previously boxed you into a role that you did not enjoy. Yeah. More hands. Yeah. And my last one. Show of hands if you've experienced decision fatigue or decision paralysis. Yeah, I wonder what to look around. Like, if you think that you are ever alone in decision fatigue or decision paralysis, you are not. It is very common. I think it is becoming the new imposter syndrome that we're not talking about a lot yet, but I think we will be. So, hi, I'm Mo. Thank you for participating in that exercise. The last prompt resonates with me quite heavily, and it's part of why I'm here talking to you all today. I have decision fatigue in most areas of my life. Everything from simple, what do I want to eat for breakfast, or where do we want to go for dinner tonight, to what do I want to do with my life, either tomorrow, or a year from now, or 5 years from now. So my career and my future are really big things that I struggle with making decisions on, and that can affect what I'm going to do tomorrow in order to move forward in the direction that I want to go. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a software engineer at Spreedly in the fintech industry. I am passionate about a couple of things, 4-day work weeks, utilizing open PTO policies, and mentorship. So if you are interested in any of those things and want to chat about it later, I would be happy to do so. Disclaimer before we dive in too deep, I'm going to share a bit about my journey and how I got here. I'm not standing up here pretending to be an expert in guiding you on career trajectories. I am just one person who's been in the tech industry and a couple of other industries, living my own experiences, climbing various ladders. I've learned from a lot of those adventures, and I am collecting what I've learned and sharing those resources with you all today. I also want to recognize that I have a level of privilege and resources at my current company that make a lot of this possible. I recognize that some of this will not be as easily attainable for everyone as I wish it was, but my hope is that everybody here gets something out of my talk, whether that be ideas on how to map out what your next steps are for professional development, nuggets of wisdom to take home and ponder in your heart, or motivation to explore things that excite you. So, let's dive in. What are we talking about here? I'm going to start by sharing a good bit about my journey and how I got here into tech. And then we will talk about different ways that you can map out your journey. We will also talk about some potential roadblocks that you might encounter along the way. No road trip is complete without a detour. And then we'll finish with looking ahead and what's next. So let's start with my journey. Well, how did I get here? Some of you, I think, have heard a little bit about this at various social events this week, so sorry if any of this is redundant, but we're going to go over it again. So when I went to college, I got a BFA in ceramics. Very random. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Why? I have no idea. I wish I could tell you. But it was fun at the time. And when I graduated, I, like a lot of us, just had student loans, and that was the thing that I had to worry about in the moment. So I did what you have to do. I just started looking for a job. I didn't care what it was. I honestly, for a very long time, referred to my ceramics degree as my useless art degree. I was told to go to college. I went to college. I wasn't told what degree to choose, so I went with what I had fun doing. And then I wound up graduating and having to figure out how to pay for that thing that I am now not using. So, does that sound familiar to anybody else? Yeah, okay, cool. So I got into the food industry, specifically coffee. I started out as a barista at a company. We won't name names. But I was organized, I was on time, I'm a quick learner, I'm obsessed with processes. So if you give me steps on how to do something, I will cling to them and I can excel. So I started to move up in the ladder pretty quickly, led to management, and I wound up managing coffee shops around the state of North Carolina at this coffee company. And they were actually the ones that moved me to Durham, North Carolina from Charlotte. So it was very exciting. I had workaholic tendencies. I don't like to say that I'm a recovering workaholic because I still have some of those tendencies, but I'm getting better at boundaries. Boundaries are important. But it led to burnout, right? Sometimes it's kind of inevitable depending on what you're doing with your life and whether you're maintaining boundaries or not. So I made a career change. Miraculously, I found a company that did art consultancy for the hospitality industry in the town where I was living, and my then useless art degree kind of became useful. I still wasn't doing anything with ceramics, but I was talking to people about art, about what would look nice in their space based on their design for their hotel or their restaurant or what have you. I started out as a project manager, again, kind of bottom, but excelled. Started learning processes, started developing onboarding processes for new project managers coming in, started to move up the ladder, wound up in management. There's a pattern in these two industries and in a lot of industries where if you want to move up, you wind up having to go into management. And that's unfortunate if you have no interest in going into management, but you're good at it, and so people kind of just push you in there. And again, I had student loans, so I was like, a pay raise? Heck yeah, I'll do anything. That sounds great. And so I just kind of kept getting shoved into these roles. And again, it led to burnout, workaholic tendencies, was willing to do everything to prove that I was worthy of being at that table and that I could do that job. So again, career change. I went to a boot camp. I had a friend that was in a boot camp for software, and I was hearing about what her experiences were, what the job hunt was like. She got a job, what it was like to work at this new job, benefits, open PTO. What do you mean they pay for your health care? So it sounded like a dream. So I went to boot camp, and then I got a job in tech. So I've been working in the tech industry for money since about 2019, early 2019. It's a little over 4 years. I've been at my current company for almost 3 of those years. And now I'm at that fork in the road again. What do I want to do? Which adventure do I want to go towards? Do I want to stay an IC and continue moving up in seniority just in my technical knowledge? Or do I want to start pursuing a management position? And during this talk, I want to share with you some of the tools that I've used recently to help guide me in one direction or the other, or, spoiler alert, a little bit of both. So, that's my journey. That's how I got to be standing in front of you today. Let's talk about how to map it out. So the career track options that I've been mostly focused on are these main 3. So individual contributor, people manager, or a hybrid role. So individual contributor, or IC, is a good option if you have no interest in being a people manager. That seems kind of obvious, right? But you love being in the nitty-gritty technical challenges of a code base. A people manager is a good option if you're passionate about leading and you want to make an impact on the people level, which is a little bit more doable when you're in a company, when you're working as a people manager. And then there's the hybrid. This can take on a lot of different roles, a lot of different shapes, and that is kind of what makes it fun. So it can be a tech lead, it can be that you're focusing more on mentorship, or it can literally be some kind of split role. There are companies, oftentimes startups, where they might be looking for an engineering manager, but the expectation is that you're still writing code maybe 30 or 40% of the time. They're out there, they look different. Those types of roles are not for everyone, but they are for some. So maybe it's for you. Okay, so let's talk about resources. These are the 6 main ones that I'm going to talk about. And some of them might be surprising, or things that you've never heard of before. So let's dive in. So IDP, we'll start with that one first, is your individual development plan. In my experience, this is something that you work closely with your manager to develop and then to continue to focus on during one-on-ones. This is my IDP from Spreedly from last year, so 2022. And you can squint and maybe read that one of my career goals in the next 12 to 18 months was to give a full talk at a conference. And one of my other goals was to map out a pathway to senior engineer. So I'm not senior yet, but we have a review cycle coming up, so fingers crossed. You'll also notice that there are some fields that are blank, and that is intentional. This is not a one-size-fits-all form. We mentioned decision fatigue. I don't know who I'm going to be in 3 to 5 years, so I'm not going to write down where I want to be in my career in 3 to 5 years, because that is not a thing that serves me to think about and to put energy into. And that's okay. Thankfully, my manager was fine with that. But yeah, so an IDP, has anyone here not heard of an IDP? Some of you, okay, cool. All right, so then great, hopefully this is a cool resource to learn about. So like I said, in my experience, it's something that you work with your manager on. There are templates online for this, so you can just search IDP or individual development plan. You participate in setting some goals for yourself, short-term, long-term goals, and then you come up with these milestones or like critical behaviors that you can do to work towards those goals. So it's probably based off of the like SMART plan, right? So you want things that are measurable, actionable, timely, that sort of thing. So some of mine were to mentor team members. I got to join the on-call rotation at my company, attend a conference, because one of the goals that I also like to include in my IDP is to get out there in the community and attend things like conferences. So it can be something that's as easy as that, getting out, interacting with people in your community, and it can be more critical, such as learning specific tools, maybe getting a certain certification. So it can cover a lot. And it's something that I was regularly talking about my manager, or talking about with my manager during our check-ins, during our regular one-on-ones. So maybe not every single one-on-one, but at least once a month, we were pulling this up, we were looking at it, we were talking about my progress. Had something dropped off the radar? If so, great, this is a good reminder check-in to refocus, adapt the schedule if we need to, things like that. And then this is also great documentation that you can bring up when it's review time. You have something written that is not a surprise to you or your manager, and it's something that you're able to track over time as you're working towards whatever your next goal is. Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is applying and interviewing. I don't have a dedicated image for this resource, but in my talk blurb or bio, I'm not sure which, I did mention that there would be pictures of my dogs. So there you go. This is Jackson on the left and Lydia on the right. So they're just going to hang out with us while we talk about applying and actually interviewing for positions you might be interested in. So the neat thing about applying for a job that you may not know if you actually want is that it's a lot less pressure, which is pretty cool. And you don't know what it is that you don't know. So you can go for it and you can learn a lot about what that role entails or find out what some of those missing pieces are as you go through that process. It can open your eyes to details that maybe you weren't aware of before. Maybe you didn't really know what was expected of someone that is in that role. And then it can actually help you decide if you actually want that or not. So I had a recent experience at Spreedly where there was an engineering manager position open. And my manager had kind of been encouraging me, because I have management experience, to go for it. she'd asked if I was interested in it, and it was very much like, I don't know, decision fatigue. So I couldn't even really form an opinion one way or the other. And she's like, well, just go for it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You get a job offer and then you actually have to make a decision, or you go through it and you don't get the job offer, but you learn a lot along the way. So I will openly admit, because I'm an over-communicator and an oversharer at times, that while I was going through this interview process, I was very candid with all of the people that interviewed me, and I told them that I did not know if I wanted that job. Spoiler alert, don't do that. Because turns out if by the end you might actually want that job, they don't want you in that job because they heard you say that you didn't know if you wanted that job. So it's okay. It worked out fine for me. I learned by the end of it that I did not want that job. And so it was just another resource and another learning opportunity that helped me decide which way I wanted to go. It was a fun time. But I also learned that I am lacking experience in working with product teams, because I had an interview session with some of the product folks at my company. So they were asking questions about types of interactions that they would expect to be having with an engineering manager. And I was like, I don't know, I'm just an engineer. And so it was great because I was able to get feedback at the end of that interview process from my peers and decide if those were things that I wanted to focus on in my IDP for the next year. So I do want more experience working with product people, mainly because understanding more about that relationship is gonna help me be a better IC. So it was a really great eye-opening experience for me, and it all worked out fine. But yeah, if you might actually be interested in the job, don't tell them that you might not be interested in the job. Okay, we'll say goodbye to Jackson and Lydia. Okay, so somatics. Has anyone here heard of somatics? Okay, some. Not a whole lot, so that's cool. This is that weird thing that I was like, I'm gonna put this in there, and people are gonna be like, what the heck? So again, I am not up here trying to be someone who is incredibly experienced in all of the things, but I was attending RailsConf in Portland in 2022, and Amy Newell gave a talk about, the name of her talk was Let Your Body Lead, and she did this really neat exercise. She is, I think, certified and trained in different somatic things. But one example that she gave that really stuck with me was to think about a decision that you're trying to make. Don't let it be so serious of should I marry this person? You can maybe use it for now I can't even think of an example. Something not as intense as that though, right? Okay, so you've got this thing that you're trying to decide on in your head, and you're gonna assign one of your options to heads and one of your options to tails. So take just a second, figure that out for yourself in your head if you wanna do this exercise. I'm gonna flip a coin, and I'm gonna tell you that it landed on heads. Okay, so you know which decision the coin made for you just now for that thing that you were trying to decide between. It doesn't mean that you have to go with what the coin decided, but in the moment that I said, okay, it's heads, you had some kind of feeling. Whether that was oh man, but I really wanted the other one, right? That's information. So now you know there's something in your gut that wanted the other one, or maybe you were like, oh, yes, this is the one that I really wanted. Great, that's information. You can utilize that to think about which way you want to go for your career, right? So if you want to use a coin to actually make the decisions for you, that is on you. But it can just be a thing that gives you more information about how you might be feeling about one of the options that you have that maybe you weren't really in tune to before then. So just something fun. If you're interested at all in learning more about that, you can check out her talk on YouTube. Okay, pros and cons lists. I don't really have a whole lot to say about this because this is relatively pretty self-explanatory, but we love a tangible list, pen and paper. You can use online tools like a Miro board. My therapist loves to tell me to write things down, journal about it. You can write lists to justify or validate decisions if that's something that you feel like would benefit you or help you. Writing things down also allows you to slowly process information at a pace that works for you, and it gives you something that you can come back to and continue to process over time. So that's why I really like to utilize it. Your pros would be advantages, benefits, impacts that it might have on your future in a positive or really great way. Your cons would be things like risks, challenges, potential impacts on other people. Let's say taking a position might mean relocating and you have a family, and that could be a con if you have kids in school, things like that. Anything goes when it comes to pros and cons lists. So just another tool in the toolbox. Mentorship, I could probably talk about mentorship for a long time. And if you were recently in Atlanta at RailsConf, there were a lot of mentorship-based talks that were really inspiring, and I left feeling super jazzed. I've been taking a break from mentorship for personal reasons, but after attending RailsConf and hearing a lot about what Adam Cuppy had to say, I feel like I'm ready to jump back into mentorship. So again, I don't have a dedicated image for this, but I tried to utilize AI to come up with an image, and this is what I got. Because that's the prompt that I gave it. Not helpful or applicable, but I still wanted to share it because why not? So that is an animal mentoring another animal in the style of the Muppets. So thanks, AI. But really, mentorship can look like a lot of different things, Muppets included. And the really neat thing is that it can vary based on the level of commitment that you have for it and the amount of time that you have to give it. So mentorship is not a one-size-fits-all. If you did not attend RailsConf in Atlanta and you are interested in mentorship, I highly recommend, once they post the videos of RailsConf, looking up Adam Cuppy's Mentorship in 3 Acts. It goes over the different kind of archetypes for being a mentor and even being a mentee. The level of commitment could be something like an hour a day, an hour a week, an hour a month, wide range. There's something out there for everyone, and mentorship can be a really great way to learn from someone who's in a position that you might be interested in, or just someone that you look up to that has paved their own way in this industry and could maybe share applicable and great things with you. All right. Lastly here for our resources are build relationships. Other humans that are in roles that you might be curious about are great resources to chat to or chat with. Talk to them, ask them questions, pick their brains. You're currently at a conference, chances are that's one of the reasons why you're here, because it's a really great opportunity to do that. But there's all sorts of things. There's local meetups, I'm sure, in your area of something. That could be Women Who Code. I'm a director of the Durham-Raleigh chapter in our triangle. There's the Women in Non-Binary Rubyists that you heard about earlier today from Emily. Maybe you attended the lunch. Great network of people. You can also just get on Meetup and search for tech-based meetup groups and find out what's out there, what's happening. Or you can do what I like to cold call people on LinkedIn. Don't actually call them. I don't actually know if there's a call feature on LinkedIn, but they put one on Instagram and it's terrible because you accidentally click the button and you're like, that's not what I wanted to do. So don't actually call people on LinkedIn if that's a capability, but you can message them. If they work for a company that you're interested in or they have a position that you're curious about, you can just send them a message and say, hey, wanted to know, X, Y, or Z. What is it that you're curious about? People love to talk about themselves, and they also love to give advice. So yeah, LinkedIn can be great for that too.
Taking out of time, I'm gonna have to talk a little faster. Okay, and then your own experiences, right? So all the resources in the world will not help you if you don't look at yourself and what you have already experienced and gone through alongside all of that. So you know yourself. So assess your own habits. I recently learned when preparing for this talk, procrastination is not something that you grow out of when you leave school. It is something that you carry with you into adulthood. And so that's a good thing to know about myself. Here we are, we made it. What excites you? Do you get really jazzed about squashing bugs? Do you get excited about refactoring old code bases, removing the duct tape, building it up stronger? And then what fills your cup? This is a really blunt question, but you need to ask yourself this. How do you feel about meetings? If you hate meetings and you know that about yourself, people management is probably not for you. That's all I'm gonna say. You just have to be honest with yourself. Okay, so potential roadblocks. I'm not gonna dive into each of these into too much depth, but I do wanna touch on them. Some of them could also be their own conference talk, but again, we're just gonna graze over it. So potential roadblocks that you could run into: lack of opportunity. There are more IC roles out there than there are engineering manager roles. It is what it is. So if you're interested in going into management, it might be that, and you really like the company that you're at, it might be that there's not an open role for you at the moment, and you might have to hold out. And it's up to you to decide if you really want to go for that role and you want to look outside your company, or if you want to hang tight and just wait for something to open up. So lack of opportunity is a roadblock. Social anxiety. Who here has social anxiety? Yeah, I cannot do live interviewing, like live coding challenges in interviews. I know that about myself. It is not a good representation of how I work in my day-to-day life. It is also not a good example of how you should be working in your day-to-day life. So I'm not sure why it's a thing that happens, but like, I know that about myself, which means that if I am looking for another job in another company, I also have to be aware of like what that emotional toll is to actually go out and apply and do the things. Same thing goes for like networking opportunities at conferences. So I just want to acknowledge that social anxiety can be a blocker for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Lack of mentorship. If you don't have like a mentorship program at your company, know that there are mentorship opportunities for you to get a mentor or get a mentee outside of your job. That's usually the first place that we look because that's where we are for a good chunk of our week. But there are other opportunities out there. So if that's something that you're lacking in your current role, I encourage you to look outside of your job. Lack of representation, another big one. If you are looking for a management position, or you might want to see if you are right for going in the management direction, and you don't see people that look like you in those types of positions, it can be really stifling to want to pursue. So this is one that could be its own conference talk. I'm just going to leave it at that. Decision fatigue. We've talked about this already. I don't really think I need to talk about it more. And then lack of support. If you don't have a great relationship with your manager, and you're trying to decide which direction you want to pursue, that can be a roadblock. Or even if you know which direction you want to pursue and you don't have a great relationship with your manager or with another manager or person of leadership in your company, that can be a roadblock. All right, looking ahead. I've shared my journey. If it feels at all familiar to you, I hope that that gives you a little bit of hope that you're not alone in the unknown that can be your future. We've gone over resources that have helped me to get to where I am, which right now is just comfortable in the direction that I'm headed. I am pursuing the hybrid role. I don't want to be a people manager, but I'm really passionate about being a mentor, and I tend to just naturally gravitate towards leadership opportunities. That does not mean that I have to manage other human beings, and that is a relief to me. So I'm focusing on developing myself as an IC while taking on those mentorship and leadership opportunities and roles, both inside and outside of the company. And that right now is just what fills up my cup. So what's next for you all? What now? I encourage you to dig deep. Ask these questions. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be doing? What is driving you right now? And that might be different for a year from now, and that's okay. Connect with peers, leaders, strangers on the internet, strangers in front of you right now. Ask questions, explore what's out there, and go for it. And know that you can change your mind, because changing your mind has been so freeing for me that I can make a decision now and decide later that it's not for me and make a different decision. So always give yourself permission to change your mind. In the fine words of Moira Rose, whatever you do, rock onwards and upwards. You are all radiant.